The group of 7 nations have officially halted American involvement in the coalition's active discussions and collaborative frameworks, representing an extraordinary development in the chronicle of the post-Second World War global system. This determination was communicated via a unified declaration released yesterday evening by Italy, which holds the current rotating presidency, alongside endorsements from the diplomatic offices of Britain, Canada, France, Germany, and Japan. The declaration specifies that effective immediately, America is barred from active engagement in G7 operations, encompassing cabinet-level gatherings, specialized task forces, leadership summits, and related official statements. The situation concerns a convergence of administrative, ideological, and principled issues that have intensified since the commencement of Trump's second term in January 2025. Based on wording included in the 5-section announcement, the exclusion results from continuous and systematic measures taken by the present American government that stand in direct opposition to the mutual democratic principles, regulation-oriented global pledges, and unified defense arrangements that characterize G7 partnership. No particular precipitating incident is identified. Rather, the document references a series of behaviors detected throughout commercial strategy, environmental obligations, backing for international organizations, and coordination regarding assistance to Ukraine after the February 2022 incursion. The official character of this action holds considerable weight. Earlier frictions throughout Trump's initial presidency from 2017 through 2021 generated pronounced public disputes, particularly at the 2018 Charlevoix gathering, where America declined to authorize the closing statement, yet never led to official removal or temporary exclusion. Officials acquainted with the deliberations characterize the present determination as having undergone intermittent consideration since the middle of 2025, with numerous European governments advocating for firmer terminology, while Tokyo and Ottawa originally championed ongoing conversation. The decisive moment seems to have transpired during confidential preparatory sessions for the forthcoming G7 Executive Summit, planned for June 2026 in Alberta, Canada, when it became evident that central agenda priorities including NATO expenditure distribution objectives, synchronized penalty implementation, and revised environmental funding commitments could not progress given the current American bargaining stance. Currently, the exclusion is characterized as conditional and reversible, dependent upon subsequent American strategy modifications that exhibit restored conformity with G7 agreed-upon stances. No schedule for reassessment has been officially announced, although various representatives speaking confidentially suggested that the soonest realistic reconsideration would occur after the 2026 American midterm elections. The declaration distinctly clarifies that direct relationships between separate G7 nations and America remain unchanged and that current treaty responsibilities, especially within NATO, persist at full strength. This situation originates from numerous policy determinations and official positions adopted by Trump's second government that have systematically expanded the separation between Washington and its conventional G7 associates. The contradictions commenced nearly instantly following the inauguration. During the initial 90 days, the government pulled America from the loss and damage mechanism ratified at COP28, released an administrative directive suspending allocations to the Green Climate Fund, and announced the nation would cease involvement in discussions regarding a worldwide plastics agreement under UNEP supervision. These actions independently prompted official declarations of disappointment from 5 of the remaining 6 G7 participants. Commercial strategy introduced additional tension. During April 2025, the White House reinstated 25% levies on steel and aluminum shipments from the European Union and Japan, charges that had been removed throughout the Biden administration, and broadened them to include particular automotive parts and essential minerals. When the EU retaliated with reciprocal charges on American whiskey, motorcycles, and farming products, the government intensified by declaring a reassessment of the comprehensive US-EU trade and technology partnership structure, Japanese authorities subsequently verified that corresponding Section 301 examinations were active, addressing Japanese semiconductor machinery and battery production networks, leading Tokyo to caution about fundamental hazard to G7 financial synchronization. Regarding security matters, the approach was comparable. Though the government maintained provision of military assistance to Ukraine, it consistently made additional installments contingent on public assurances from Kiev to enter discussions directly with Moscow, phrasing that multiple European diplomatic leaders described as undermining the G7's established stance that any resolution must be agreeable to Ukraine. During the NATO conference in Washington in July 2025, the American contingent declined to approve a suggested statement section confirming an unchangeable trajectory for Ukraine toward alliance participation, compelling the organization to release a diluted version. In private sessions, numerous executives purportedly challenged President Trump regarding burden allocation calculations, receiving only responses that reposition the matter as one concerning America First equity, rather than shared protection duties. Environmental diplomacy experienced arguably the most pronounced separation. During September 2025, the government officially informed the United Nations that America would not rejoin the Paris Agreement, referencing incompatible financial damage. This pronouncement arrived 7 days following the G7 environmental cabinet members' collective appeal for hastened reduction of coal energy without emission capture and expanded financing for developing nation climate adjustment. The timing was extensively understood in European governmental centers as intentional disengagement. Throughout late 2025 extending into early 2026, discrete diplomatic initiatives persisted. Special representatives from Berlin, Paris, Ottawa, and Tokyo traveled to Washington consistently, pursuing gradual progress on at minimum several matters. Each mission yielded restricted practical arrangements, including provisional tariff postponements and a cooperative declaration on Red Sea maritime protection, yet no essential transformation in approach. By January 2026, confidential G7 administrative-level conversations had transitioned from methods to restore American involvement toward maintaining fundamental G7 operations without American engagement. According to accessible details, the exclusion became actively operational as of 1 UTC on February 9, 2026. G7 operational tier gatherings that previously incorporated American representatives were concluded early yesterday afternoon, with attendees notified that upcoming sessions would advance in a six-nation configuration until the statement requirements are satisfied. The G7 coordinators, senior officials accountable for summit organization, have already rearranged the subsequent preparatory video meeting for February 18th, excluding an American connection option. Cabinet-level divisions covering economics, international relations, energy, and development are similarly modifying schedules to remove elements requiring complete agreement or combined American approval. The circumstance remains under ongoing examination by individual participant administrations rather than any official international tribunal or arbitration mechanism. The G7 represents not a treaty-founded institution with mandatory implementation systems. Therefore, the exclusion functions exclusively as an ideological and administrative determination, reached through reciprocal understanding among the 6 continuing participants. No prompt action or implementation modification has been declared concerning current direct or collaborative arrangements that originated before or exist beyond the G7 structure. For instance, American involvement in the G7 Expedited Reaction System on Misinformation continues operating at a practical level via separate channels, though ideological level direction from Washington is no longer being requested. Financial marketplace responses have thus far remained restrained yet attentive. The American dollar measurement increased slightly during overnight trading, whereas European and Japanese equity projections displayed minor reductions of 0.4 to 0.8% in early Asian commerce. Experts assign the constrained movement to the reality that most direct financial instruments, including tariffs, sanction classifications, and export restrictions, remain administered by individual governments or alternative international organizations such as WTO and UN Security Council, rather than G7 synchronization. Central banking representatives in Frankfurt, Ottawa, and Tokyo have released concise declarations reconfirming autonomous monetary strategy authorities and emphasizing that G7 exclusion does not modify current currency exchange mechanisms or IMF allocation obligations. Additional developments are anticipated in upcoming days as separate administrations distribute official summaries and as the excluded American government presents its initial public reaction. White House press session. Records from yesterday included no direct mention of the statement. The daily summary concentrated alternatively on domestic production declarations and frontier protection figures. Presently, officials have not suggested any crisis protocols, reciprocal removals, or instant ramifications beyond the administrative modifications previously outlined. Diplomatic office-level communication pathways between Washington and the six capitals continue accessible and characterized as completely functional by representatives in Berlin and London this morning. Political leaders and constitutional scholars are reacting along factional and organizational divisions, with some highlighting legal precedent and constitutional boundaries, while others accentuate strategy consequences and wider ramifications. In European governmental centers, the prevailing sentiment has been one of regret, balanced by determination. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock characterized the measure as distressing yet unavoidable. If we intend to maintain the legitimacy of the G7 as a principles-founded collective. French President Emmanuel Macron, speaking at a previously arranged Élysée occasion, termed the exclusion a required interruption to defend the consistency of our shared pledges, while highlighting that pathways remain available for authentic realignment. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, whose administration controls the present G7 leadership, released the most cautious declaration, observing that the arrangement must mirror common objective. When that objective deviates excessively, modification becomes crucial. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau presented the determination in administrative instead of disciplinary language, informing journalists in Ottawa that the G7 has perpetually functioned through agreement. Without it, we cannot legitimately communicate as a unified entity. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi circumvented dramatic phrasing completely, restating Tokyo's inclination for sustained participation and depicting the exclusion as a provisional modification to operational procedures. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy delivered a somewhat more direct observation, noting that collaboration demands conformity on fundamental tenets, including democracy, legal governance, and backing for independence, and contemporary decisions have rendered that conformity unattainable presently. In Washington, the preliminary public response has been resistant. Various Republican legislators and congressional representatives portrayed the action as European fragility and internationalist excess, with one distinguished commentator on broadcast media, terming it the inevitable conclusion of years of America Last strategies from Brussels and Berlin. The government itself has not yet released an official documented reaction, although two senior representatives speaking anonymously informed journalists that the White House perceives the exclusion as representational performance with negligible practical influence on American concerns or international reputation. A third individual familiar with the National Security Council indicated internal conversations are concentrated on whether to regard the removal as a prospect to construct alternative partnerships with non-G7 associates, including India, Brazil, Australia, and particular Gulf nations. Progressive commentators in America and internationally have provided varied evaluations. Some Democratic politicians conveyed concern at the diplomatic separation, cautioning that removal from G7 synchronization could diminish American influence on subjects ranging from artificial intelligence administration to challenging Chinese financial pressure. Others contended that the government's individual decisions had rendered the division foreseeable and conceivably even tactically beneficial for emphasizing distinctions between America, first objectives, and conventional transatlantic agreement. Currently, no official declaration validates a conclusive result or establishes a conclusive termination period for the exclusion. Diplomatic contacts throughout various capitals stress that the action is constructed to be reversible and that confidential, indirect discussions are projected to persist even as official arrangements exclude American involvement. The subsequent phases encompass ongoing examination by the 6 remaining G7 participants via their customary coordination networks now functioning without American contribution on schedule establishment, composition, or closing declarations. The Italian leadership has already distributed a modified operational strategy for the balance of 2026 that eliminates subjects previously designated as demanding American agreement, including cooperative terminology on digital taxation structures, synchronized essential minerals, reserve objectives, and revised specifications for international development institution financing connected to environmental adaptation. Alternatively, those initiatives will either be postponed, transferred to alternative platforms, including G20, OECD, or direct arrangements, or advanced among the 6 with more limited, agreement-oriented results. A documented ideological announcement reconfirming the exclusion specifications is anticipated within the subsequent 10 to 14 days, presumably released following the next G7 International Cabinet members' video meeting provisionally arranged for late February. That record would specify the particular standards or strategy modifications Washington would need to exhibit for restoration. Although representatives emphasize that no official inventory exists, as the G7 prevents inflexible requirements in preference of comprehensive ideological assessment. Various European contacts suggest the threshold would probably concentrate on detectable transitions in at minimum 3 of the subsequent domains, including renewed participation with Paris Agreement systems, reduction of independent tariffs against G7 associates, restored public dedication to Ukraine's independence without prerequisites that oppose prior G7 declarations, and involvement in shared environmental financing commitments at amounts compatible with pre-2025 standards. Any determination to remove the exclusion would demand complete approval of the 6 continuing participants and a favorable indication from Washington that the fundamental contradictions have diminished adequately. The procedure is projected to adhere to conventional G7 administrative schedules, signifying months instead of weeks, unless an exceptional summit or cabinet-level advancement transpires. Meanwhile, the 6 will persist in releasing cooperative declarations, synchronizing on penalty implementation via concurrent systems involving EU, UK, Japan, and Canada, and progressing non-disputed subjects including challenging foreign information distortion and supply network durability for semiconductors. Concurrent diplomatic initiatives are expected. Confidential communication from Ottawa and Tokyo is already proceeding to determine whether selective American renewed participation on particular matters, including Arctic protection, Indo-Pacific financial framework, or worldwide health readiness, might be achievable without complete arrangement involvement. Conversely, some perspectives in Berlin and Paris are privately investigating methods to formalize G7+ deliberations that could incorporate India, Australia, South Korea, or others on chosen subjects, consequently diminishing extended-term reliance on American conformity. No official suggestions following those directions have yet materialized publicly. Marketplace and organizational commentators foresee a duration of tactical readjustment instead of severe interruption. NATO preparation persists unmodified. IMF and World Bank administration remains constant and direct defense and intelligence cooperation arrangements advance typically. The most concrete immediate-term consequence is probably to be experienced in summit presentation. The 2026 G7 Executive Gathering in Alberta will currently be designated as an assembly of 6 instead of 7, with modified seating, photographic configurations, and statement composition that removes American phrasing. We will persist in observing this advancing circumstance and deliver developments as authenticated details become accessible. Presently, this remains an ongoing ideological and administrative procedure within the G7 structure, one that examines the strength of a collective extensively characterized by its casualness and agreement-oriented nature. The exclusion of American involvement designates the most critical division in the platform's nearly 50-year chronicle. Nevertheless, it similarly demonstrates the constraints of representational diplomacy when fundamental strategy contradictions become irreconcilable in actual time. The approaching weeks will disclose whether this occasion becomes a provisional turning point or the commencement of an extended reorganization of Western synchronization systems. Diplomatic contacts throughout capitals stress that direct American associations, including financial, protection, and societal, remain the foundation of the transatlantic and trans-Pacific structure, and that the G7 determination is intentionally adjusted to prevent successive destruction to those connections. Simultaneously, the action conveys an explicit communication. Prolonged deviation from mutual democratic standards, international pledges, and shared protection arrangements produces organizational ramifications, even within the most flexible of executive-level associations. Marketplaces, partnered military forces, and worldwide organizations will monitor attentively for indications of intensification or reduction. Official declarations from Washington, once they materialize, will presumably influence the account direction in the immediate period. Without rapid reconciliation, the 6 continuing participants appear equipped to administer the G7 schedule independently while maintaining pathways available for eventual reintegration. The account is distant from concluded, and its final resolution will rely on selections not yet executed in various capitals, including Washington. We will furnish additional coverage as official summaries, cabinet gatherings, and any reciprocal pronouncements surface in the days and weeks forthcoming.